Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
And Amine.
Today we're talking about some of rock's biggest icons. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So I know icon can be a very subjective term, especially when you're talking about music. Music is very subjective also. So these are just some of the bigger ones we think are some of the like Mount Rushmore icons of rock music. Make sure you drop us a comment down below and let us know what some of yours are. For me, I think it all kind of has to start with Chuck Berry. I mean, Chuck Berry was kind of, I look at, Chuck Berry is one of those artists that is the foundation of rock music. I think rock would not exist as it is today, or really as it has for the last, 60 years, without Chuck Berry and a lot of those earlier artists. So I think whenever you talk about icons, that's always somebody that, I always put up at the top of the list.
I would argue he's far more important to rock music than even Elvis. So for me, it's tough. You look at the Beatles as a unit, very iconic as a unit, but would they be as iconic if it wasn't for just the two main songwriters, which would be Lennon and McCartney?
So I think it's hard to separate them.
It is hard to separate them, at least for that period of time. Obviously their solo stuff, for some is just as iconic, for others it's not so much. But if you look at that period of time when it was a Lennon-McCartney duo, that is iconic. And that, like you were saying about Chuck Berry, defined rock music going forward ever since.
Yeah.
There isn't an artist alive who hasn't been inspired or influenced by the Lennon-McCartney songwriting duo. So I would throw them out as iconic as a unit.
Yeah, because I think as much as Chuck Berry and those earlier artists kind of helped form rock music, what Lennon and McCartney did in the 60s really changed where rock would go for the next 50, 60 years.
Right.
And I'd be one of those people that say you really can't separate. I don't think John Lennon and Paul McCartney were as good apart as they were together. I like some of the John Lennon stuff. I like some of the Paul McCartney stuff. There's also a lot of stuff from both of their solo careers that
aren't that great.
Yeah. But them together, what they did in the 60s with the Beatles, I don't think it's been replicated in the history of rock music.
Maybe, arguably, you could say the Mick Jagger-Keith Richards duo.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the same time period, and I would still put Lennon McCartney slightly above that as far as influence on music going forward.
Yeah. Another person whenever I think of rock icons, I immediately think of another person from a very long time ago, and that's Jimi Hendrix. I think Jimi Hendrix, what he did in a very short period of time, revolutionized the way the guitar is played. And there are people still, in the 2020s that are still heavily influenced by what Jimi Hendrix did, 60 plus years ago.
Yeah. Well, you just can't deny that it was kind of he was a flash in the pan in a sense.
I should say 50 plus years ago.
Yeah. His career was a flash in the pan, but it's the fact that it still stands up, that people are still experiencing this and taking from it influence so many years after. He's been gone 53 years. So taking that into account, the fact that there's been no output in 53 years and he's still influencing guitarists today. Yeah, that says a lot.
It's a testament to how great he was. They always say the brightest flame burns quickest,
Another one for me would be David Bowie. You had this on your list as well. What can you say about David Bowie that doesn't scream icon? He was never the same person from album to album.
Yeah.
He covered multiple genres, influenced multiple hundreds of artists. Just you can't not have him on that list.
I think David Bowie is one of those artists that his icon status, I think, goes beyond music. Even a lot of the movies that he did.
And he can be an icon on almost any level individually too. He could be an icon just for his music, or he could be an icon just for his film work, or he can be an icon just for his social stances. I mean, he works on every level.
Yeah. One that I might get a little pushback on, I know Ian's probably not a big fan of this one either, is Jimmy Page. I know that, Jimmy Page's guitar work alone, I think will put him up, towards the front of that Mount Rushmore for me. I think that, what he did really throughout his entire career, what he still does today, speaks volumes about how influential he has been. Of course, all the great songs he's done over the years, but he's also, I think, a very underrated, overall musician. I don't think he gets the credit that I think he rightly deserves.
It's not that I would disagree with that. He's a great guitar player. He could be considered one of the best guitar players. But Led Zeppelin as a unit, it wasn't necessarily about that. But still, that's the only criticism I would have. I think he's a fantastic guitarist, arguably one of the greats. Led Zeppelin is a great band. I love every album they ever made. It's a band that I go back to a lot. I don't know. I can see if there's people who are watching this and they comment because they disagree with Jimmy Page. I kind of see both sides of it, is basically what I'm saying. So what I'm going to throw out is, I wouldn't say it's controversial. It's kind of goofy. But I think anyone who really, if you really dig into it, you can see where I'm coming from with this. I'm going to say Beethoven. I think seriously. I know you're all laughing. Beethoven, I think, was the first hard rock heavy metal artist. If you listen to his music and just listen to the beginning of the Fifth Symphony, and then listen to any hard rock intro, Smoke on the Water, Aqualung, listen to those intros and listen to the intro of the Fifth Symphony, you'll see what I'm talking about. You really will. A lot of it's there, and I'm not the only one who's made that.
Stretch, but okay.
I'm not the only one who's made the connection between specifically heavy metal and some of those old classical artists. This is not necessarily my idea. I just happen to agree with it. But I would say that, looking at it on a broader spectrum, because obviously no one's going to sit there and say Beethoven should be on a Mount Rushmore with David Bowie.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at how the music is structured, there's a huge influence there that may not even be noticeable, because that's kind of what classical music is. It's not really, it's there and it's part of our consciousness, but we're not really aware of it. So I would throw that out there as a goofy, slightly controversial recommendation for the icon list. I would say good old Beethoven.
So, drop a comment down below if you agree with Ian on that one.
Come after me. I get it. I understand. But
I think it's kind of a stretch. I mean, I see where you're coming from with some of that, but yeah, I think it's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
One that I didn't really think of until just now, and one that might not be a really obvious choice to a lot of people out there.
Mozart? I could have made that argument for him too.
Is Weird Al. I think Weird Al is very iconic. The question is, do people really consider him rock? I mean,
well, he's kind of tackled a lot of genres, and let's face it, his primary instrument of choice is the accordion. I wouldn't necessarily call that a rock instrument. I mean, then again, neither is the flute.
That's kind of where I was going to go. I think if you look at, but I would say the great thing about Weird Al, and people think of Weird Al and think of these parody songs. I think what makes Weird Al great are not the parody songs, it's his original songs. And if you listen to any of his albums, he has some really great original tracks that I think people just don't really give him credit for, because all they think of are those parody songs.
Eat It and Fat and Amish Paradise, which I love to this day. Yeah. The video specifically.
But yeah, I would definitely throw a Weird Al out there.
Tina Turner would be an arguable iconic rocker, even though, I mean, her music kind of transcended genres anyway, but you've got an artist who was very successful in a group setting and then extremely successful as a solo artist as well, up until she passed away. Her output might not have been as prolific or even as arguably good as some of other artists we've mentioned, but there's no denying that when Tina Turner was on stage, she was iconic, regardless.
She owned every stage.
Stage she was on. She's another artist who went somewhat into acting and stuff. She worked with David Bowie. She worked with everybody. Yeah. So I would say that for me, I would have to throw Tina Turner in there. I'm not even a big fan of her music, to be honest with you, but you can't argue her status.
Yeah, you can't. It's hard to argue the icon that she was. Right. And I don't think she gets a lot of the credit she even deserves.
Right.
So I think, like, looking at rock icons, there are some in the 90s also you could throw out there. Some of the ones we were talking about before we started recording, Kurt Cobain,
Chris Cornell,
Dave Grohl. I think Dave Grohl,
and even more so than Kurt Cobain,
kind of transcends what he did with Nirvana, because with Foo Fighters, all the other projects he's done over the years. But it kind of got me thinking, like, after the 90s, like, who are the rock icons of the 21st century?
Right. It's tough because I feel like there isn't, or at least not yet, maybe. Like, even some of the people that we were, like, how iconic will Dave Grohl be in 50 years?
Yeah.
You know, to the next two generations.
I mean, but Dave Grohl was, technically Dave Grohl was a 90s musician. He started Foo Fighters in the 90s.
But I mean, will you know, 2 or 3 generations from now, will they be looking at Dave Grohl the way that we're looking at Jimi Hendrix or you know, Jimmy Page? Will he be on that level that they're at?
Yeah.
That's the question. I mean, that goes for, you know, Kurt Cobain and Chris Cornell. I think they will to some degree, maybe not as much. And there's still artists that could be coming up now that would never even be considered iconic yet, but will be down the road.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's kind of hard because the way rock music changed in the early part of the 2000s, there really isn't, and I say changed because it became more homogenized. It became more of a commodity for the labels. They didn't really want big stars that they were going to have a hard time controlling. So I think, like, as far as like true 21st century icons go, Jack White, I mean, is probably the biggest of them that I could think of. Maybe Chester Bennington. Really, those are really the only two I could think of.
Right. I think you could put Dave Grohl with that too, just because, again, it's, if you're looking at it comparatively to all those other artists, a lot of the same things apply. His output is there. His influence on artists that are coming up now.
I don't disagree with you about Dave Grohl. I'm just saying I kind of lump Dave Grohl in with the 90s and not so much the 2000s.
I feel like he was more iconic. He's become more iconic since, say, the late 90s into the early 2000s.
Yeah. And he's kind of branched out more with other side projects
Absolutely.
in the 2000s. I guess I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
I think, for me, though, the clear-cut, like, 21st century rock icon is Jack White.
Probably.
And all the other stuff that he's done outside of music with Third Man Records, you know, the way that Third Man Records has really kind of helped push smaller musicians, long forgotten musicians. You know, there's a lot that Jack has done through that avenue that, even with his iconic status, I don't think he gets a lot of the credit for.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I'm not a big Linkin Park fan, but you can't deny Chester Bennington's contribution to rock music of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And you could say the same thing about Chris Cornell, although I'm a huge fan of Chris Cornell, all of his work, you know, Audioslave, Soundgarden, all of it.
Yeah.
So you can't argue with that. You have to probably say that, you know, when you and I are long gone, whoever's doing this kind of thing then will be looking back and saying these things about Chester Bennington and Dave Grohl, and hopefully, you know.
Well, that's all we got for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. You know, it's a big topic, and there's a lot of people out there. Obviously, you could throw out there. Elvis is another one that I could have thrown out. He would not have agreed with me, but
No.
There's a lot of other ones out there that you could throw out there. But drop us a comment down below. Let us know who you guys think are the big rock icons. But like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you see a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.